All right, so welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to another session of Back to the Greenhouse, a growing series for instructors. My name's Justin. I'm a project associate for the Center for Rural Affairs. If you're not familiar with the center, we're a little nonprofit. We're located in Lyons, Nebraska. We do a lot of food and agriculture work. And we put on this series for Farm to School, Back to the Greenhouse. This is our fourth and final session today. We've had previous ones on hydroponics and greenhouse production, food safety, and moving harvest from school gardens and greenhouses into the cafeteria. And then our last one before this was on community engagement. And we have those on the center's YouTube page, and I'll throw those in the chat once more before the end of the session today. But I'd like to welcome everyone here today. We're going to be talking a little bit about innovative greenhouse funding and how you can work with your students to fund programs or teach your students some cool entrepreneurship opportunities. We're joined by John Porter, as always, from UNL Extension, and I'll let John introduce himself and kick us off.
Okay. Well, I'm John Porter. I am with Nebraska Extension. I'm the Urban Agriculture Program Coordinator. I'm both based out of Omaha, and I work a lot with those who want to grow fruits and vegetables, both sometimes on the home scale, community gardens, urban farmers. I work a lot here with Bryan High School and a few other things. And I was actually just on a meeting about a new position for someone that will coordinate between the university and ag ed teachers. So getting, I guess, more into the ag ed side with extension work. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to share some thoughts and some ideas around funding. We don't have like a big, long presentation planned. I'm just going to share some ideas. And then what we'll do is also have a discussion on things that you've done. We're thinking of things like school-based enterprises, things like that, where you're really, finding funding opportunities to really support the work that you're doing in the greenhouse or a school garden or something like that. So I'm just going to share some web pages with information, and we'll get to those links. We'll share them in the chat. And then we'll also probably send them out via email to participants so that they have those in their email and it's easily clickable. So I'm going to share my screen. So the first thing, we often hear is, well, I'm going to go get a grant. I'm going to get a grant. And grants do have their place in this type of work, and they can be quite handy. But my philosophy on grants is that they're great at like starting ideas, and especially if you're looking at like a long term, like you're going to have a greenhouse or a garden for years and years and years. Especially these days, funders are really looking for people that have a plan for sustainability. So you look at grants as ways to maybe start things or try new things. But to just go get a grant to like always be doing the same thing over and over again, probably not the best option. But there are, I think, some grant opportunities. So this is a web page from the National Agriculture in the Classroom that has a listing of different types of grants that would be available to school garden type projects. And there's just a big list of them. A lot of them are private foundations. Some of them are companies. So some of these are very small grants. So if you're saying we need to build a greenhouse and we need to go get a grant, this won't be the place for you usually. Greenhouses cost a lot of money. And so you'd either have to, work with your district to secure the funding that way, or, have, a local foundation with a large amount of money that they could give. Most of these grants are probably a few hundred, a few $1,000, but they can help you if you already have a greenhouse. If you wanted to start something new, start some sort of new project, they're grants are typically an option to do something like that, especially if you have something innovative to try. It can often be a way to like do almost like a startup, like something new. And so there's lots of grants. If you don't know how to apply for grants, there are often people either in school districts who know how, or even like if you need partners in the community. I work for Extension. Extension, we love partnering on grants. Even if we don't get money out of them, if you don't write us in to receive funding from them, we often can work them into our work. And so we can serve as partners for those and actually help write grants. A lot of us have that expertise. Organizations like CFRA, Justin here, they wrote this farm to school grant to do this program. I'm a partner on there. Just like I said, I help partner with them. They're not paying me. I'm just here and helping. And so there are lots of ways to think about, funding. So you can just do, all I did was just go right on to Google funding for school gardens. And so it came up with grant opportunities. So we have things like Seed Your Future, which has a $3,000 grant. So if you're looking to do something new, try something new, you can usually find some grant money. Now, if you are really good at writing grants and you want to write for, all of these tiny little grants that are, a few hundred or a few $1,000, and you can get as many of them as you can, that's good. Typically, you can't just keep going back and back to the same grantor and writing for those. So definitely, the thing that we wanted to more focus on today was, now that you maybe have some startup funds, or you have something going, how do you then turn that into a sustainable project where you're getting income or you're getting support to continue the work that you're doing? And so one of the things that we want to talk about in this grant that Center for Rural Affairs got and they've been working on is greenhouse to cafeteria, supporting the production of some sort of food crop in the greenhouse or in the school garden that then goes to the school cafeteria to feed the school. In many cases, that's something that's done, like the school garden, the ag ed program, the FFA chapter, they do it, and then they just give it to the cafeteria. But we're going to actually talk about how that can be a source of income back into the program, or that you can at least utilize money from, say, the food program at the school to support your school garden or your greenhouse or your hydroponics. So first, I want to just talk about thinking about ways that we actually get food from, say, a greenhouse or a school garden into the cafeteria, and then we'll talk about the money part of it. So really, it's all about working with the food service folk. Don't just show up with 10 pounds of lettuce and 50 pounds of tomatoes and say we grew this, but it's really working with the whatever sort of person is in charge in the district, and then also on the school level to talk about what is it that you want to do, or what foods do you want us to concentrate on? Like, we can grow leafy greens, we can grow tomatoes, we can grow these kinds of things. How can then we work with you to get those in the cafeteria? It's not typically required, but it's a good idea that you have some sort of food safety plan in place. I worked with Bryan High School here with one of the teachers that works in their Urban Ag Academy. And I went last year and did some food safety presentations for students and gave them some information to help write their food safety plan, because I am a certified produce safety trainer. That is a required training for like produce farmers to be able to sell produce above certain amounts of income. that they get from that produce. Or sometimes we would refer to it as like GAP, which is good agricultural practices. So there are things that we should do to keep produce safe, and really have suggested that you have some sort of written plan in order to make sure that you're doing that. And it's, we're working with students typically, and students don't always think and make those connections between, oh, I should wash my hands before I go harvest this lettuce or these tomatoes, because, I've been, doing stuff all day that got my hands dirty and I can make someone sick. And so we want to think about, having plans in place to support selling the produce, especially if we're selling it to the cafeteria, but also you can think about it to the public as well. And I forgot that about 4:15, my aquaponic system behind me kicks on. So if the pump gets too loud and the water gets too loud, just let me know, because I heard it just kick on right behind me. And then think about who should be involved: cafeteria, volunteers, students, who is really involved. And then, how do you make that connection? So one of the things that Farm to School also focuses on is not just getting that local produce into the cafeteria, but getting students to understand where the food comes from, and getting them to understand that it was locally grown, and how local can you get, more local than you can get than actually growing it on the school grounds. So finding ways to promote that so students are more interested. Studies show that students who are involved in the growing process, children who are involved in the growing process, are more likely to eat those fruits and vegetables than if they're just from the grocery store, because they actually can be in touch with the story of the food that's grown. So that's just a little bit about the actual, how to, think about and approach selling produce to a school cafeteria program, food service program. But then we need to talk about the money side of it. So can you sell produce from your cafeteria or school garden, that's food that's grown on the school grounds, to the cafeteria itself? So on the federal level, if we think about, we're regulated by all these USDA plans like the National School Lunch Program and food programs through the USDA. So typically schools get funding through those programs, and so they have to abide by the rules of the program. And so there's a document that I found, and we'll be sharing. I'll share it in the chat just in case it's a little small on the text. So let me bump it up a little bit. So this is like a policy group called the National Policy and Legal Analysis Network to prevent childhood obesity. And they did an evaluation of the national school lunch program rules to see what can and can't be done about serving school garden produce in the cafeteria. So in their analysis, they found that unless there is some sort of state law, which I don't think that Nebraska has, or any local regulation, the question that they asked was, can a school sell food grown in their school garden that was funded using the nonprofit school food service account? And can the school food service purchase produce from a school organization that's maintaining and managing the garden, such as FFA? And so what they found in the regulations is unless there is a state law that forbids it, that a school can sell produce a school organization can sell produce to the cafeteria. So if you're saying my FFA chapter is maintaining this as a school-based enterprise. They're doing hydroponics, they're growing lettuce, tomatoes, whatever they're growing. The FFA chapter can sell produce to the cafeteria. And so that is a possibility for them to do. Now, the other question is, and maybe, you would have to talk to school administration, to the county. You have the link now to this policy page, so you can share it with them. If you say they can't do it, it's not, legal, it's not allowed by rules. You can actually show them that this, yes, it is allowed, that we can do this, and this would support this program and the ability to do this in the future. If they don't want to pay directly, then what you could think about would be like bringing money from that school food service account over to maybe purchase materials for your greenhouse or your teaching, if they're not going to pay the organization directly. Now, the other question is, so you can actually use funding from like the nonprofit full food service accounts and from food service to support school garden projects. And so they could, they could just support, they could buy the supplies, they could buy the seeds, the soil, the hydroponic system, the hydroponic nutrients, whatever you're doing. So they can support that by purchasing those items, and then you provide food back to the cafeteria. But let's say, oh, we grew more lettuce than we can use before it goes bad. So the school itself or the organization. So the school itself, let's talk about that first. The school itself can actually sell produce to, say, like teachers, PTA members, roadside stand, the public, if it uses funds from the food service account, as long as that money goes back to the food service account. And then that could actually be used to support the school garden, greenhouse, hydroponic system, whatever. And also, if we're looking at it as like an FFA school-based enterprise, there is nothing saying that the chapter can't say, you have like plant sales and stuff all the time. Well, as long as you're growing it safely, you can actually sell produce. So you could sell lettuce, leafy greens, tomatoes, herbs, whatever you're growing. It doesn't have to be, like a poinsettia or a house plant or a petunia. You can actually sell food as long as you're doing it safely. And so basically what this says is that there's no obstacle on the federal level to either having the food system or the food service support school gardening's efforts at the school, either by providing supplies, or that your chapter could even sell the produce at a, I guess, a reasonable market rate. Like you could ask them, what are you paying for tomatoes per pound when you buy them from the Cisco food truck or whatever? You could ask them to support you at the same level, or whatever would work best for them. So I just wanted to talk about that briefly. Are there any questions?
I'll ask a question pretty quickly,
Okay.
John. And I don't want to put our audience on the spot at all, but I know that we have Stacy Turnbull with us from the State Department of Education as well. And I'm just kind of wondering, in Nebraska, if this is something that we've ever really seen before. Like, are there schools out there who have a sort of model where they might be selling from their FFA program or their school gardens or greenhouses to their cafeteria? So I don't know if you know, John, but maybe Stacy knows.
There definitely are. I just don't know how many there are. I'm heading up next Tuesday to visit a couple of schools that are doing this, but I just recently read online about North Bend doing something similar. So I think we've got more schools doing it than I'm aware of, and I'm really excited about the opportunities.
All right, that's good to know. So yeah, there could even be some mentorship opportunities out there.
Mhm. So are any thoughts on this? Have you ever thought about doing this? And I know, like, I think, Mr. Cooper, you're a teacher. So Ash, you're not, in a high school, but you might be working with local high schools. Are you doing this or know anyone that is doing this?
I'm not.
In Clarkson, we're a relatively new program here, so this is the one thing that has been discussed since we have Bluebirds right here in town as far as facilities. So we want to utilize their facilities, but we want to get kid power in there. The whole content is we don't want to compete with them as far as the flowers and stuff that they raise, but so we were looking at fruits and vegetables that we could raise using their facilities. That they have a few open spots, and one of the things I did bring up, and then the administration did get excited about, was the greenhouse to cafeteria program. So we're looking at trying to initiate that this year,
Mhm.
and then that's why I'm kind of watching these things, but. So yeah, I kind of gather we need to put together a plan so that we can present not only to the administration, but to Bluebirds themselves to know where the expenses are going to get paid from and that type of thing.
Right. Yeah, and I think, thinking about it in this way, can help with that. So, it's sort of like, you're excited about the greenhouse to cafeteria and us providing food to the cafeteria. So are you, going to buy the supplies and materials whenever we need them? Or do you want us to, run this like an enterprise where, we're producing this, we maybe have some startup funds from something, and then we're producing and you're, paying us as we go along. So we actually teach, it's an opportunity to teach the kids about like business management and enterprise management and entrepreneurship.
That's what we're kind of looking at, involving the plant science class, but not only that, but the agribusiness class as well. So we're utilizing more students actually than just the one set. And then how we're going to carry that through the summer. But I says, I have to sit down with several people to develop this plan before we get going here. I'd like to get that done by the first of the year so we can start implementing things after January 1st. But you know how time goes. So I said, as you talk, I'm taking a lot of notes here as to what I want to get done and what we need to get done and that type of thing. So, but the financing was one of the questions I had, because I know there is some FFA grants out there for such things, but I just didn't know if there was some other sources as well.
Yeah, I mean, you can find a lot of like those smaller grants that I shared with you. I don't know if there are any, like a lot of the farm to school grants, are, I think, maybe above that scope of, they're more like teaching and supporting and stuff like that. We've been looking at that, and you've been looking at it more, Justin. Is there an area in there where like an individual school would like apply to get funding to like start a project like that? Do you know?
Yeah, I think it's a possibility. So I'll share the link to them, but USDA does have farm to school grants out there. They have a few different tracks. If you were looking at creating a program like this, you Their implementation grants are a bit larger, but I think something like this will be able to fit into it. They also have smaller opportunities that are more geared for starting edible school gardens that might be a little bit more on the startup kind of side rather than the taking the food into the cafeteria kind of side. They have a lot of action planning grants if you're just getting your farm to school programs off the ground.
I put in the chat there, but Tracy would really encourage you to look at the Farm Credit Services of America grant, and that's really open not just to FFA, but that's open to a lot of different groups. And this is a good match for that. We're using the community.
So really the rest of what we wanted to discuss was more of a discussion on, what people are doing, both in terms like of sharing, like, those resources, if you've gotten a grant or something like that, or what are those school-based enterprises that you've done or that you've thought about doing or you've seen others do that are an opportunity to get funds to support the program. And I know we don't have a large group, so maybe we won't have a long discussion on this, but what are those ideas or things that you've done that would support a school greenhouse or school garden program by selling what you're growing?
Well, I know here at CCC with our food service, it's a bit different. It's a privately owned thing, so we can't really sell produce to them. Our idea is potentially to get students involved with growing pollinator plants and then hopefully selling those to our facilities department to introduce into our landscaping to create more pollinator friendly landscaping. So that's sort of one of the ideas we've had here. And we would probably be using, applying for internal grants.
So is that not being able to sell to the food service, is that like a policy thing, or is it just you don't think that the company's open to it?
They may be open to it, but they also may not. They currently get most of their produce through Cisco. And I know there's been some issues in the past with supplementing. Cisco's not always too happy about those situations. And so they may, potentially not supply other things.
Yeah, I think that's an issue. Definitely, if their current food service provider sort of sees it as a competition, which is actually really a shame. But the one school-based enterprise that come to mind, so it's actually a good example. It's the holidays, and we have these guys. So I actually picked these. I was on UNL campus last week, and the horticulture club grew poinsettias and sold them at UNL campus. So I went and picked this up. So there's the horticulture club sticker. And I always think about that this time of year. They can be a beast to grow, both in terms of keeping them happy, but then they have specific lighting requirements to make them turn color and be pretty, or otherwise they're just like an ugly green weed. So I think it's an interesting plant science experiment, because you have to talk about day length and photo periods and ways to get those things to bloom, but then you can also turn it into an enterprise. I think I've heard several schools doing that. I think didn't Taylor try that this year at Bryan? I thought I heard her say she was growing poinsettias. I can't remember.
I'm not so sure. she's got so many irons in the fire, it's hard to keep track of what she's doing. So I
True.
haven't talked to her lately either. So well, I'm sure that'll come up in our next discussion. So
Right. So there's that. There's like the spring plant sale with like bedding plants, or you could do like vegetable plants. I think looking at, yes, petunias and impatiens and all those things are always going to be popular. But if you're looking at, changing demographic of gardeners, we're actually seeing more recently that vegetable plants and edible plants are more popular. There are more, like, especially younger people are more in tune with vegetable gardening and do more vegetable gardening. Like last year, because of the pandemic, we had an estimated 16 million new home vegetable gardeners in the United States. And so I think that's just a growing place, and a place where I think it would be easy for an ag ed program to connect with, not only, potential people to sell plants to, but with the students as well. I think looking at the trends of gardening. It's kind of a funny story, but last night I'm in a community choir, and we have a concert on Saturday, and we've been having rehearsals all week, and I do a lot of things with gardening. So I'm on Backyard Farmer, the TV show. We do like webinars, we do all this kind of stuff. And our crowd definitely skews older. Like I always joke that, like I have a big fan base of like little old ladies across Nebraska. But it was kind of funny. This young guy in our choir, he's probably like 25, came running up to me last night after a rehearsal. And he said, I am thinking about gardening. And I went on YouTube and just searched gardening in Nebraska. And I couldn't believe you were the first video that popped up. It's like, yes. It's like, I didn't know you did that. That's like super cool. Like, well, thank you. Like now I have like my little old lady fan base and you, right? So I think vegetable plants definitely, or even, if you're, there in Clarkson, if you have bluebird, you might even have the ability to do stuff like some like trees and shrubs. Like people are really into things like blackberries, raspberries, being able to grow those things out in more of a nursery setting might be an interesting thing to think out about as well, unless they're selling them, which I don't know that they do. I think they concentrate more on like ornamental plants.
yeah, and landscaping plants and stuff like that. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, John, it seems like plant sales, like seed starting and plant sales, is getting to be an area that's a little higher competition. I mean, I feel like every spring there's always a good amount of plant sales going on. So it would almost be a good project for students to go out, explore what's out there, and if there's a gap or a need that they might be able to fill in that area with something maybe more unique like that, like shrubs or trees or berries.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think just finding those different things that people aren't doing, like maybe poinsettias are a dime a dozen, and you don't want to deal with all the hassle of trying to grow them out and get them to actually turn color. I've seen, I did this not with a school, but a few years ago with a group of master gardeners that we have, where we did a bulb kit sale for the holidays. So we have like amaryllis, and we have paper whites, and we have like those different bulbs that people grow. And so we actually put together kits that were very popular. So we gave you a pot, and we gave you like a baggie of potting soil, and then we gave you your amaryllis bulb or your paper whites, and they were nicer than those kits that you buy in the store with like the ugly green pot, and usually like a higher quality bulb than what you would get in those kits. Like you find them at Lowe's or Walmart, and they're like $5 to $8 a piece, and they're, usually lower quality. So we ordered them from a bulb company, and they were very popular, and it was very easy. We didn't have to grow anything. We just assembled the kits. We pre-sold them, or we sold them at events. And so I think there's lots of different ways to think about, those enterprises where you could, make money, but also introduce students to plants, or, you could start plants. Valentine's Day, could you do something? This is the horticulture club at UNL did this back in the day. I'm from West Virginia, and I went to WVU, and I was president of the horticulture club when I was there. And for Valentine's Day, we forced tulip bulbs. So we potted up tulip bulbs, like bright red tulip bulbs. We put them in pots. We planted them. We put them in a chiller to refrigerate them because they need a cold treatment to bloom. And we brought them out to bloom just in time for Valentine's Day. And we sold out of them. Like, it was weird. Like, people love the tulips, and I don't know why, because it's not really associated with Valentine's Day. But and these days too, I think houseplants very popular, especially with younger people. So that could be a great way to connect with students. There's like a houseplant craze now, especially if you have the right ones. For example, anything that has variegation on the leaves, like it's not naturally variegated, higher value. So there's a plant called Monstera albo, which is basically, a tropical vine, and it has white splotches on the leaves. Just so happened, like, I rescued one from a greenhouse, like a school greenhouse that was closing. It had been in my office corner for years, and shared a picture online, and people were asking to buy leaves off of it, like nodes to propagate. It turns out that a leaf off of these things for someone to propagate their own, pretty pricey. To give you an idea, one weekend I sold 5 leaves off of that vine, and I made $900. Impressive, right? And that was just the leaf. Like, if I actually potted those up myself and started the plant, I could sell each leaf for between $300 and $500. So I think there's different things to do out there that would be a good way to, introduce students to plants and entrepreneurship, but then to also, be able to get funding and support by actually having that school-based enterprise that feeds back into your greenhouse or garden.
Another thing that we're looking at as well, I happen to have a brother-in-law at the University of Florida in charge of their sweet corn development.
Mhm.
And I know he gets me free samples. But the kids are kind of interested in raising some sweet corn in the wintertime. I don't know how difficult that is. We've tried it before. I don't know. What's your thoughts on that?
So you're like doing it in the greenhouse, trying to do it hydroponically, or just potted?
We're 5-gallon buckets. And
Okay. I mean, that's interesting. I mean, you would be able to do it if, you'll have to do like the hand pollination and all that kind of stuff. But, it's doable. Is it doable on a scale where you would actually make a lot of money? I don't know.
we do it for more sampling than anything, but because of all these different varieties that they develop down there. So we do a taste test, basically. I did it at Hayes Center under their greenhouse in the early spring, but yeah, it was more of a taste test type thing than production.
Yeah.
But we got to go through all the growth stages and everything of corn. And I didn't know if going through the winter, is that something that could happen with sweet corn or not?
Definitely be harder. You're going to have to use a lot more light. So, typically, if you're in a greenhouse, you get a lot of sunlight, and then you have to supplement if you don't get enough. So in the winter, you're going to have to pump up the light to support it. I mean, it's possible, and it's something fun to try. It's just, being able to get it to grow. Probably the easiest thing to grow through the winter is like leafy greens, because they don't need as much light, and you can actually have a cooler house. So you can actually not have to heat as much if you are growing lettuce or bok choy or other leafy greens. So it's a good wintertime thing to do. Strawberries would also be a good option. They don't require high heat. They're sort of a novel crop. I mean, if you can, go harvest a strawberry in January, February, or even March, people are all excited about it. So that's, any other thoughts or questions? This is really all we had prepared, unless there was something else, Justin. I think I remember everything. My brain's been dead this week, so.
No, this is a great discussion, John. The only other thing that I think I would mention is putting some emphasis on community partnerships too. I know in our last session, we really went into community engagement, but Ash, you had mentioned planting prairie grasses and pollinator type grasses. And I know that we've had schools in the past that have gotten into that through some nonprofits that had dealt a little bit in that and needed a high amount of grasses, and they were able to partner up with them to start those grasses in their school greenhouses. So partnerships with nonprofits, with even like state government agencies that might be looking at that as well. Other unique crops. We had a school that was working with a restaurant in their town actually, and they actually grew herbs for the restaurant in town, which was kind of interesting. A little bit more of a specialty crop, and they wanted to get that crop locally too. So it was fairly easy for the school greenhouse to work on that. So just some additional ideas.
Justin, where do you keep, or where can we find the video from prior sessions?
I'll put that in the chat right now, Stacy. It's on the center's YouTube channel. And I'll also send all of these resources out via email after the session's over.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts, ideas, questions?
All right. Well, really appreciate all the discussion today. Thank you all for joining us. I do, before we leave real quick, I have a short evaluation on the session. It would be great if you all could complete this. It shouldn't take any more than a few minutes. So, but yeah, thank you so much for joining us. This is the last of our sessions for this series. Yeah, I hope they've been valuable for everybody. And yeah, thanks so much. Any other final thoughts, John?
I think I'm all good now. I'm talked out.
Thank you both. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care, everyone. Have a good night.